Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
It's a deadly episode today, Michael.
Yeah, we finally get the action. It's all action.
But lots of people die. We just don't know any of them, so I guess it's not a big deal. But anyway, there's a but the dragon is gone. Oh, spoiler, sorry everybody. But yeah, we're here finally at what people would think would be the climax of The Hobbit is the death of the dragon. And yet there's like another 6 chapters after this.
Yep, and more battling.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, 5 more chapters after this, and more battling. Because again, the point of the story is to reclaim the mountain, and what's going to take to do that. And it turns out that the dragon's actually just kind of the first part of that.
Yep, step 1.
So we'll jump into that. We've got our Hobbit facts. In fact, today we have 3 Hobbit facts because they all kind of fit into this episode. And I hate to do that because it's so hard to find them after 31 episodes now of finding a new Hobbit fact.
You're going to blow 3 facts in one day, huh?
I'm going to blow 3 facts, but I kind of can't not because they kind of all, they have to do with this chapter. If I move to the next chapter, all of a sudden it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. So I'm going to try and keep it with this chapter. 3 Hobbit facts. We've got an extended episode, everybody. We're going to be looking at some comments from some folks, some feedback we've gotten about last week's episode about the Arkenstone not being a Silmaril, which, a lot of people like to look at and go like, hey, that's a Silmaril, right? If you really look at it, it's not. Guys.
It's funny because it's one of the few times that someone in my real life, sorry folks,
this is all fake. We don't really know what we're doing here. This is
I don't know about fake, but it's fun. It's fun. It's so folks in my real life, in my serious life, in my boring life, let's put it that way. Although it lately hasn't been boring with weddings and such, but they brought up that episode and started to debate me about whether it was a Silmaril. So
how long did that debate last? Like
2 minutes, because I let them have their say, and then I brought in some of my typical sarcasm and along with my points. And I mean, they're good friends, so we sarcasm is a way of life amongst people sometimes. But,
I don't happen to know this person, do I?
I hope do not know this person.
Good. All right,
no,
good.
No, it's one of the fathers from the school that my kids go to school at.
Okay, yeah, because I would judge them pretty harshly and wouldn't really want to talk with them anymore.
And they may be listening to this episode.
No.
So hey, Scott,
sorry.
how you doing?
No, sorry, Scott. Hope to meet you someday. No, anyway, it is not the Arkenstone, everybody. If you missed last week's episode, which I'm sure you didn't, it is not the Arkenstone. However, we can certainly say that the Silmarillion might have been an Arkenstone in itself in the way that Tolkien described it as a holy stone, which is what Arkenstone kind of means.
Well, and also I think it was in the tradition of the Arkenstone. I think we mentioned this. I do think it was a gem imbued with light, which the Noldor elves were very good at doing, and the Silmarils were just the highest example of that.
Yeah, and in fact, we're going to talk about the point of that a little bit. There was a good discussion between, I think it was between Harrison, Old Man Reader Rich, and Sigüenza about the enchantment of the Arkenstone and the enchantment of the dwarves, and what does that greed mean, and how did we get there, or how did they get there, and how did Tolkien arrive there? Some of it is
fun.
It's fun, and it's a little bit fun to look at, to retcon it, to retroactively connect The Hobbit to the Lord of the Rings, and we'll take a look at that, kind of discuss that in our extended edition, which you can get by becoming a member at theonering.com/member or theonering.com/Patreon. Thanks, everybody.
In other words, folks, you have to stop being a freeloader for a little bit in order to enjoy a discussion about light and enchantment and gems and dwarven greed. So come join us.
Yes. Theonering.com/member. All right, let's just go right into it. Let's not beat around the bush. Let's not talk about let's not any small talk about our boring lives or our serious lives, right? Let's only talk about the fun stuff. So we'll get right into
Hobbit facts.
Okay, 3 facts today, everybody. 3 facts for chapter 14, Fire and Water. Maybe the best title of this chapter outside of Queer Lodgings. So, of this book. Anyway, did you know that originally chapter 14 and chapter 13 were switched in Tolkien's original draft, and then he decided to switch them? It's an interesting little tidbit.
I did not know that, but that makes sense because obviously chronologically you would expect 14 to come first because Smaug is just left in rage, and you would want to know what has happened to the raging dragon.
Yeah. So in his second draft, he moved it from he switched the 2 chapters. And
because suspense.
No notes about that, but I guess so. Because you make them want the dragon a little bit more, and don't put what you think is the climax as soon as possible, I guess. In any case,
yeah, if you think about it, chapter 13 would have been a lot more boring without the tension of wondering where the dragon is the first time you read the story.
Totally. Yeah. You'd be like, oh, well, we already know where the dragon is, so there's no worry about him ever coming back. So yeah,
the dwarves are worrying about it. You'd be like, nah, whatever. It doesn't matter. Don't worry, guys. You're fine.
All right. Second point. Did you know that in this chapter, originally, in his first notes, Tolkien had Bard dying?
I did know that, yes.
Yeah. And that was the end of Smaug and Esgaroth and Bard. And then he paused either for a short time or a long time, and then scratched it out and replaced, but not of Bard. Instead of and Bard, and said it was not the end of Bard. So Bard, he decided that was to continue. And that goes into the final Hobbit fact in this here, is that, did you know that in the original outline for the end of The Hobbit, in his notes on where the story was going, it was completely different. And this is in his notes that you can find in the History of the Hobbit. This is on my copy. It's on page, I don't know if this is bad, but page 666. of
wow.
this. It's
dicey
in
territory here.
Plot note C. So I'm going to read this because it is really interesting. And this was a sheet that he had written probably at around chapter 11. What's chapter 11? Chapter 11 is on the doorstep, right before they get into the mountain. And he had written, this is where he still was calling Gandalf Bledorfin. And so he was creating, like, how am I going to get rid of Smaug? And so this is what he writes. This is after Bilbo is going to go down a third time into the mountain without the dwarves. And so in Tolkien's notes, he writes this: Bilbo creeps in the third time and waits in shadows till the dragon creeps out of hall. And there's a lot of missing prepositions and articles here when he writes this. He's just scribbling it down really fast. So I'll just write exactly what he wrote. Yeah. He steals a bright gem which fascinates him. The dragon returning finds theft and is awful rage. He goes to war with the Lakemen, meaning the dragon, goes to war with the Lakemen. The people see him coming and cut bridges to lake dwellings. The dragon flies over them and sets houses alight, but dare not settle right in lake. They quench fire with water and shoot darts at him. Glint of gems in dragon's belly in light of fire. He settles at side of lake and tries to starve them out. Funny. Dwarves see the steam from afar and are bent on carrying out gold. Bilbo watches them stagger out, but warns them the dragon will come back to the entrance of the tunnel. He has a question mark there. But what can they do with gold? Burglary is no good, a warrior in the end, but no one will go with him. Bilbo puts on ring and creeps into dungeon and hides. Dragon comes back at last and sleeps exhausted by battle. Bilbo plunges in his little magic knife and it disappears. He cannot wield the swords or spears. Throes of dragon. Smashes walls and entrance to tunnel. Bilbo floats away in a golden bowl on the dragon's blood till it comes to rest in a deep dark hole. When it is cool, he wades out and becomes hard and brave. He discovers sources of the running river and floats out through the front door in a golden bowl. Found by scouts of the Lakemen. All right, I'm going to keep going because this is still really interesting. Sorry for this, everybody. I know it's long. The dwarves dig through the tunnel and take possession of their old homes, but the gold is mostly crushed, and they cannot use it because of the dragon's body. The men of the lake and wood elves come up and besiege the dwarves. They attempt to block the front door. Bilbo, sorrowful, meets Bledorfin in the, it says illegible, place of Laketown. Blad rebukes the besiegers and makes dwarves pay Bilbo. So Gandalf, Bledorfin, rebukes the besiegers, the Lakemen and wood elves, and makes the dwarves pay Bilbo, which, you know, fits with the dwarves and their greediness and their original pettiness. A share of his part, Bilbo's part, he gives to the Lakemen and to the wood elves, though they may not deserve it. They escort Bledorfin and Bilbo back through Mirkwood. Completely, 100% different other than the dragon leaves and attacks.
I just want to see the Bilbo in a golden bowl and a pool and a river of dragon blood. That's what I want to see.
Well, we did see Thorin on a skiff of something in dwarven gold floating down somewhere. So anyway, I thought that was interesting. Bilbo was really going to be the hero, and he even says at one point, let me find the exact line. He says he's a warrior till the end. What was that line? There was a dragon. Didn't I read that? What did I didn't highlight that little part.
I thought it was not a warrior, but maybe maybe in the killing scene you
yeah. I don't know, maybe
my problem is I don't have your notes in front of me.
No, I know. I'm sorry. Well, in any case, Bilbo was the warrior to kill the dragon. He goes there in his with his ring on and hides until the dragon comes back and he's asleep, and so then he just sinks the knife up into the hilt and it disappears, and he's
sad. No more sting.
What he needs to do. Yeah.
And then many years later, Frodo and Sam perish because they didn't have sting, and the world is conquered by Sauron. So that was...
That's totally true. Poor Sting. He's gone. But this makes Bilbo create create Bard essentially, and change the Arkenstone into something not given by Bard to Thorin, but found, and then creates the Necklace of Girion and all that sort of stuff. So anyway, this is funny, right? Because in a way, right, we talked about before how Tolkien discovers his story, and you can say here, well, he had a plan for it, but as he was writing it, he discovered it differently as the characters grew and as the
plan changed.
Grew. Yeah. So anyway, there you go.
It's interesting because if you think about that process, I've been thinking about that a while. I know it's a bigger discussion, but just a brief note on his creative process, which has come up in quite a few Tolkien podcasts that I listen to and discussions. You can only be successful. I've come to the position. You can only be successful with that kind of methodology where you just sort of, you change your story as you're going through it and you discover the real story. If all the stones, the literary stones you're working with, the foundation stones, are just immense and solid. Like Tolkien has such a rich background in fairy stories, in history, in the peoples of that, of the land that would become Middle-earth. He has so many decades of development on his own story about Middle-earth, the elves and the Silmarillion, what became the Silmarillion, that he can do that with success. Whereas a lesser author is going to try to do that, and their story is just going to be crap. They're gonna be like, I'm changing it as I go. Can you imagine that? Like, although I feel sometimes that folks like Brennan and Sanderson do exactly that. They just sort of change it in the moment as and their stories are worse for it because they don't have Tolkien's chops, essentially, with literature, with history, with his previous work, the entire world that he's created.
Exactly. I think because he had such a foundation, even in The Hobbit, as it was being infiltrated by Middle-earth and by all the languages he'd created already.
Right.
That foundation just made the story stronger and gave it a better direction. Because, and we'll get to this again, is like, so why the arrow? Well, the arrow is the oldest, essentially, piece, or the oldest weapon they have. And what as you pointed out so many times as we read through Unfinished Tales and similar, what is really good about the old things? They're the best. They are the best, and so that's a little thing that infiltrates The Hobbit that Tolkien knew, because it was the foundation of what he knew and what he knew. All right, so Michael, we'll go through the whole chapter this week if we can do it. Would you give us a brief overview of the chapter 14?
I do nothing briefly, but I'll try. So the overview of Fire and Water is fairly simple. I like the perspective. It starts with the perspective of Laketown and how they see the fire glow, the glow on the horizon. The optimists claim it's the dwarves mining gold again. Like, I don't know why gold glow would be mining gold, but that's a very, very odd thing to think for people that are mostly practical. But anyway, so they quickly discover it's the dragon. And the person that discovers it, or at least tells them that it's going to be the dragon, is this new character, Bard. Who is first described as a grim voice, and he's described as grim many times during this chapter. So they prepare. They have some time. It's interesting because it gives you an idea of the distance across the long lake, because they have a while. They have enough time to throw down a bridge, cover all the houses in water, pull out all their weapons, get the women and children in boats, etc. So that, one imagines they have at least, I don't know, 20 minutes, half an hour as Smaug is hurtling across the lake. So it's quite a distance. And then Smaug comes, and this perspective switches to Smaug's perspective, and he's wary of the water of the lake, as you mentioned earlier. And then the fight begins, and he begins swooping down, and they're shooting at him, and he's swooping down and destroying things and lighting them aflame. And they're putting out the flames, but there's nothing they can do. All their arrows do nothing. He takes out the great house with his tail. He smashes things. He burns things. And he is basically winning. And basically all the people begin jumping into boats and into the lake itself, except one contingent of bowmen led by the grim man Bard. And Bard is down to his last arrow, which has a name called the Black Arrow, and apparently it's a very old arrow. And he's about to shoot it in sort of his last act of defiance, because he has nothing left to fight the dragon with. And then, lo and behold, a talking bird lands on his shoulder, and a thrush speaks to him, and he finds that he can understand it. And it says that he can understand it because he's from Dale. He's descended from Girion, Lord of Dale. And so he understood. The bird tells him about the previously discovered weak spot in Smaug's otherwise impenetrable undercoat of armor and gems and scales, and he takes the shot, and just like the original story where Bilbo's dagger sinks all the way in, his arrow sinks all the way in and disappears and strikes the dragon's heart, killing it in one shot. And the dragon rears up and in agony and screams, and then comes crashing down onto the town itself, onto Esgaroth, destroying the remainders of the town, and dying in the water. So the rest of the chapter is about the attempt to recover for the lakemen. So they realize their home is destroyed by the dragon, and they're going to go to the shore and build some huts and to do. But there's also this conflict that occurs now between the hero of the moment, Bard, and the master of Laketown. And we'll talk more about that. But there's a conflict, and the people are more inclined to go with Bard. In fact, one might sense an imminent overthrow in the political order, except the master of Laketown turns out has his job because he's real good at rhetoric, and he swings the blame onto the dwarves. And so the people get distracted, as mobs always do, and they begin blaming the dwarves. And so there is no overthrow of the master, although Bard ends up doing most of the work and leading the people. He sends messengers to the elves, who have heard of the death of the dragon already and were marching, or at least the coming of the dragon, and were marching, and they divert to go to help the men of Laketown. But they have an army that's marching overland. And it says even the goblins of the Misty Mountains and Bjorn hear of the dragon's death, mostly because of all the birds. So this is all about how birds are real,
right?
In this in this state. So that's how the chapter ends, with the army of the elves and Bard leaving with men to go to Dale, and the elves about to leave, but having helped them. And 11 days. This is 11 days later. So 11 days after the death of Smaug, these armies set out for Erebor, for the Lonely Mountain.
And so I mean, by far, this is the most climactic moment,
yes,
of the book so far. And before we get into the details, I want to say, I think the first time, how was your first time when you read this? I remember distinctly thinking, who's this Bard guy? All of a sudden,
yes,
in the story, and why
I have to say,
it feels
my memory is similar, except that with the recent denigration of dwarves in terms of their moral drop, or the clarification of how they aren't really heroes, as Tolkien said, I remember that, and Bilbo's insufficient. And for me, the rise of Bard and the master of Laketown is pathetic from a warrior's perspective. And so for me, when I was a kid, the rise of Bard it fit. it was like, something clicks into place. We have a hero now in this story, and this is a fairy story, and most fairy stories have a hero. And so when it came to the opposition of the dragon, we have a very clear heroic figure now. And I found that, although, it was surprising because we hadn't really mentioned anything about him up to this point, I was satisfied as a young child. How about you? What was your experience?
Well, I don't know how old. I think I was 6th grade, maybe when I read it, because I only read it a year before The Lord of the Rings, so I might have been a little bit older than you. But I distinctly remember going like, "Oh, wait, did I miss this guy?" Like that was the feeling I got. Was he mentioned earlier and I didn't remember him? Like what's his import now? And I will say, it's not a wrong feeling I had, or it's not. I don't think it's improper to think that at all, because I think he does come in rather suddenly into the story.
Oh, absolutely.
He's such a heroic figure. In the same way, it would be sort of like Faramir coming in and essentially knowing what needs to be done and immediately taking Frodo to Mount Doom and making sure that he gets there because he's such a noble character, right? He comes in without any warning or without any sort of predisposition for the reader to know who he is. So and I will say this is one place where the decision to introduce Bard earlier in the films was a good idea. I don't think you could have done it in the way that the book did and not introduce Bard at all. However, the way that they introduced Bard, I found just and the way they had the dwarves in Laketown. We won't get into that. But in any case, I just wanted to say, like, there are little things that the film had to do, which I'm totally fine with. It's always the execution when it comes to that point.
You mean the introduction of Bard beforehand?
The introduction of Bard before actually killing the dragon.
Yeah, actually, that's a good point, and I have no problem with that. Like that fact that they introduced Bard beforehand in the movie, like to have him kind of come out of nowhere all of a sudden in the midst of the dragon attack would have been really weird in a movie setting. So the fact they had to introduce him earlier is fine. It's like you say, it's the execution that of everything with regard to the movie. But anyway, so I found it interesting that Bard, when he is introduced in the first couple of paragraphs, he first is introduced by calling the dragon the king under the mountain, the only king under the mountain we have ever known.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's important. I mean, and that is a thing. The mountain is the dominant geographic feature that they always notice, and so making that point is kind of a good thing. In fact, I was thinking about this. Like one of the things they said he wrote early in the chapter is about the Lonely Mountain is only its high peak could they see in clear weather, and they looked seldom at it, for it was ominous and drear even in the light of morning. And I remember us talking about like what this mountain was. It was kind of like Mount Rainier, which is an old volcano near Seattle. Right. And I remember I had a brother-in-law who lived in Seattle for a little while, and the thing they would say is like when it was clear you could see the mountain, it'd say the mountain is out. And I was like, oh, so this is kind of true. This is the same sort of idea, that there aren't clouds covering the mountain, and it's far enough away where it will be covered. It's only clear weather that reveals it. And I thought, well, let's talk about how far away that is. And so from Seattle to Mount Rainier, it's 60 miles. So that could be the distance that essentially, when they see spurts of flame in clear weather, that would look like gold because it is so far away. So even if he's coming 60 miles an hour, probably faster since he's a large dragon, but if he's going twice that fast, that's still 30 minutes that they have from the time he leaves the mountain to the time he ordered Laketown, if it was about
and they do listen to Bard. That's the interesting part. And also other interesting bits. They clearly have a plan. Like you don't prepare for this kind of a situation with all the preparations they made, but by making it up on the spot. Like they're not going to be able to pull this off. So clearly they have there's some kind of understanding of what they would do in the case of this kind of attack, because they douse all their houses, they get all the women and children on boats, and which you can imagine that being the case in a lot of different scenarios. But the whole dousing of everything and gathering
the cutting of the bridges,
the knocking of the bridge, because if you think about it, the bridge is the only place that a large dragon would be able to stand to land that's near the town. So, and the fact that they have a bridge that's both sturdy enough to hold the dragon and that they can collapse in a short period of time is pretty interesting. So there's I know this is, as is my want, I'm going to bring up the cultural icon of Lord of the Rings Online. They do a really good job of this afterwards, because you can go to Esgaroth following the path and the War of the Ring. There's they've now done a bunch of air regions and questing and stuff after the War of the Ring, and so you can go and you can develop relationship with the elves of Mirkwood, but you can see Esgaroth, and they do a really good job down to the bones of the dragon, sticking out of the lake,
awesome.
and then they have the new Laketown as well, built north of that with the bridge and the houses and stuff. And it's pretty cool.
It's a missed opportunity, man. See the bones of the dragon in the film a little bit later as Bilbo heads home.
Exactly. Well, although at that point it'd still be rotting. I don't think it'll be bones yet.
Maybe they could throw like he got burned by himself and falling into.
The burn. That's right. That's right. He was burned from the inside of his fires. The
head is sticking out with a few. I don't know.
You're right.
A few ribs coming out. It would have been cool. I'm not.
So that detail was interesting about their plan. They've clearly thought about what happens if the dragon attacks them, and then, as you said, this whole opposition. The lake becomes a person in the mind of Smaug. So the specific passages where the bridge was gone. This is from Smaug's perspective, and his enemies were on an island in deep water, too deep and dark and cool for his liking. If he plunged into it, a vapor and a steam would arise enough to cover all the land with a mist for days. But the lake was mightier than he; it would quench him before he could pass through. So he can't even land in it and dive and come back up. It's going to quench him, which is interesting. It's like they're and it does eventually obviously quench him.
Yeah, it's kind of easy to read past that and not realize this is why he probably never attacked them. He wouldn't go there to what's the point? They're not doing anything to me, and I don't want to deal with this large lake. Because remember, this is not a small reservoir. This is a large lake still that he has to deal with and
extremely large. Yeah, it's true. And and there's nothing for him, right? It's not like they have tons of gold or anything like that.
Yeah.
Right.
There's no harm to him. He's just as Bard says, he is the true king under the mountain that they have known, and so why worry about the ants underneath him? So the arrow. So they have, like you said, they have a plan. He gets together the other bowmen, and they're firing arrows at him, and he doesn't know essentially how to take him down until the thrush comes up to him and tells him about the dragon's unarmored opening. Right. So I would imagine this talking thrush, which we will talk about the talking birds in more detail in our extended edition, because there's more than just one reference to that in this chapter. But this time we do actually hear the thrush talking directly to.
Yeah, we hear the words right
to him. He says, "This is what the thrush says. Wait! It said to him. The moon is rising." Which is interesting. The moon is rising. I don't know why does he say the moon is rising? Look for the hollow of the left breast as he flies and turns above you. I guess that's saying it's going to be light enough to see the hollow of his left breast.
Right.
So this is what the thrush says. And while Bard paused in wonder, it told him of tidings up in the mountain and of all that it had heard. So it's there giving him the whole lowdown about where the dwarves are and what the dwarves are doing.
I think it's like a good 30 seconds as the things burning around him. It's like telling him all the things. Yeah. Because this was, of course, the thrush that was knocking snails on the rock that Bilbo scared away in the last scene before it flew off, right before the dragon came and wrecked everything up in the mountain. So this is that very same thrush, although Tolkien doesn't tell us directly that it's that thrush, but we have, obviously it must be, because it's telling him all these details that it would have heard, because remember Bilbo told the dwarves about the weakness in the left breast. So that's the only way. It had to be that thrush. And I like, so I like that fact, and I like also we get a history of the black arrow too. Mm-hmm. So he's got this one arrow, and it's not even a normal arrow, not just because it's a black arrow, but he references the fact that he saved him for last because he always uses it and recovers it. And he said, "I had you for my father, and he from of old. If ever you came from the forges of the true king under the mountain, go now and speed well," which is now giving us an idea that this is probably a dwarven-made arrow, and it's probably enchanted because it was this gift given to the lords of old of Dale and passed down to Bard. So as many things of the dwarves are made enchanted, my guess would be that this would be the same, especially if you got an arrow that's used over centuries and never breaks and is always recovered. That doesn't seem likely from a normal arrow perspective.
It occurred to me that this is the black arrow. And if you remember, the black sword of the Mormigil, right? I believe that was Beleg's sword, was a black sword, right? That's Turin's companion who Turin accidentally killed. We won't go into that.
That's true.
But so I wonder if the black, like that had a part to it, or if I didn't find any other reference to this or the reasoning, but there's certainly a truth to that. Like the blackness of it was sorry. I can't get into that other discussion.
In the modern era,
the modern era totally takes on a different thing. I'm just like,
we can't talk about a
freaking color of the arrow. So the blackness, right? Because it is black, something about that makes it different. Just he didn't name it the red arrow. He didn't name it the gold arrow. It was the black arrow.
Well, there is a red arrow. There is a red arrow in Tolkien.
There is a red arrow in Tolkien, right? That is true. However, that's 10 years.
It's not made to be used as an arrow, though. It's interesting.
No, that's just a message thing.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So, but in any case, I don't know why. I just thought it was interesting that black has import here and black has import even in the Children of Turin, which actually he had probably already written. I think by this point, I'm pretty sure he would have at least written it down because parts of the Silmarillion.
Children of Turin. This is part of the published 1937 edition. This story, right? It's not it isn't the rewrite that Bard appears in. It's the original version.
The original, yeah.
Yeah. So maybe he hadn't yet, but maybe I don't actually know when Children of Turin was written.
I'm going to try and find.
But the internet does, no doubt.
I know. I mean, it was formed as part of the Silmarillion. He had written that. He had started writing that in more detail before he had done The Hobbit too. It was inspired, right, by the story of Cullervo, which I have back here in Sigurd and Gudrun. So Turin Bar, I mean, ultimately, the fall of Gondolin, right? There's a relation to that. So he'd thought at least somewhat of the characters that would be related to Turin at this point. But I can't find precisely when it's written. In any case, I'd be curious if I had time to do a deeper dive into why it's black. That would be interesting to me. That'd be very interesting.
I mean, one could imagine a couple possibilities. One is its fletching is black, and it's another is that its shaft and fletching are black, which would make it interesting. The other is that the arrowhead itself is black metal. It's some kind of enchanted metal.
Right.
I mean, it doesn't have to be enchanted.
Which is what the sword essentially was, right? Because
exactly. To follow in the Silmarillion, it's the sort of Beleg thing. One doesn't know. Okay. As with many things, Tolkien leaves it to our imagination, so we can make of it what we do. But what isn't left to our imagination is that the strong hint that this is from the forges of Erebor,
yes,
therefore made by the dwarves, and passed down. So that's undoubted. I like the fact that Tolkien still in the dragon arcing around. He points out the sparkling gems on its belly. Tolkien loves gems with light in them. He just can't help himself. Like every time they come up, he's going to mention, in this case, the sparkling fires of gems in the moon. He loves the moon too. He mentions it a bunch of times.
Yeah, and even I'll bring up this if you're watching the vision that Tolkien had of Smaug being shot by the black arrow over Esgaroth, over the Long Lake, over the city. And real fast, I want to say, Tolkien. I love that Tolkien wrote that the bow twanged, because I immediately, the only other time I think, like, onomatopoeia is not his thing. If you guys, onomatopoeia is words that sound like what they mean, like pop and splash.
Yeah, it's rare in Tolkien.
So, but he says twanged here, and he also says twanged during the scouring of the Shire when the Hobbit bows twanged and shot Sharky. So in any case, I love that the whole that he uses that there. I don't know why it stuck out to me, but I was like, he never uses onomatopoeia much, but twang is his favorite word in that.
He does like that one. Yes.
Anyway, okay. So this is his vision of Smaug, and we can see, if you're looking here on YouTube, you can see that the bow is kind of right here. It's right there. Or it's not the bow, the arrow. You can see it.
I was going to say the bow, huh?
Sorry. But the bow is not, I can't get this right. The arrow is not in the right place. He's like, he put down in his notes. You have it up here. I'm trying to get to the history of the Hobbit here. Let's see if I got it. All right, here we go.
That the arrow's not in the right place?
Yeah. And so he says a few things about this. You can see here that when he drew this, they wanted to use this as the cover, I think, for a second edition or the 1966 edition, and he didn't really want to do that.
Wasn't having
he didn't find it good enough. And his notes on the side, which you can see here, let me zoom out just a little bit, are this. The writing in the left margin reads this: the moon should be a crescent, and you can see you can kind of see a crescent there, a little bit of a crescent. It's like he drew it, but then wanted to make sure that people knew it. There's a little X by it too. The moon should be a crescent. It was only a few nights after the new moon on Durin's day. Again, the details matter, man. Like if you're going to draw a picture, make sure the moon looks the right way. In the bottom left corner, down here, these little notes right here, it says this: the dragon should have a white naked spot where the arrow enters. So clearly he thought he meant to have more armor, probably a little more gems on this painting than he originally drew it with. And then the last notes at the bottom here, which you can see, are Bard the bowman should be standing after release of arrow at extreme left point of the piles. So that would be, you can see he even has the little arrow right over here at the extreme left point of the piles. This is where Bard should be. But he wasn't sure if this was good enough to relay what his mind's eye sought, and he didn't want to put this out there for everybody to see. So I think this appeared in I have the book here, the Pictures by J.R.R. Tolkien, that book, by Christina Scull and what's his other name? Anyway, but yeah, so this was never published by him as a cover of a book. Which
is why it is sad to me that the Hobbit movies so much opportunity was lost. And the stupidity of Bard using his son as the stave of a bow to fire, like, it's just so dumb.
Wow, I forgot about that. You're right.
It was awful in physics, awful in storytelling. Just another example of when you try to ad hoc change Tolkien, you just end up with something worse, no matter what you do. If you're going to fill in gaps that Tolkien didn't fill in, fine. Do it according to his spirit. But if you're going to try to just change his story, it's going to suck.
It fails. It fails every time.
And it does. And indeed, it did suck.
Yeah. All right. So the dragon is shot down. He's killed. He plummets into the fires of there. Tolkien writes this: the black arrow sped straight from the string, straight for the hollow by the left breast, where the foreleg was flung wide. In it smote and vanished, barb, shaft, and feathers. So fierce was its flight. I also didn't appreciate, by the way, that the black arrow was this special, large, huge shaft of a spear that was...
It was a ballista bolt.
There you go. That's the word I'm looking for. Ballista. Yeah, it was not good. Not good in the film. It's so... Everything about it it's just so bad. So bad. I like Tolkien's details here, and like he has the leg flung open as the arrow's going in. And Smaug in that pose that I'm in when I step on a Lego. It's awesome. the pose that all fathers are in, honestly, when they step on a Lego, where you fling your arms wide and
your head goes up, and a great roar comes out. Yeah,
and it is a shriek that would deafen men. That is for sure. That's exactly what Tolkien writes. With the shriek that deafened men. When Smaug stepped on the Lego, he felled trees and split stone. Smaug shot spouting into the air, turned over, and crashed down from on high in ruin. So he does this whole flying up. He shot spouting into the air, spouting flames into the air. So he's almost like a flare, like a massive, dangerous, huge flare, like volcanic eruption of fire. And he turns over and crashes down from on high in ruin. And then full on the town he fell. His last throw splintered it to sparks and gleeds. The lake roared in. So he is essentially destroying the entire town. Right? There's really not much left to do. The only people that survive this are the people that have already left.
I love the use of. I mean, Tolkien loves GL words. So the fact that he revives the old English gleeds So
Yeah.
glitter is a word that he almost never passes up the chance to use whenever it's a. But his onomatopoeia, not an onomatopoeia, I'm sorry, his alliteration in that whole sentence is awesome. And
which sentence?
So I was the previous sentence. Sorry, I was finding it. The one that you partially read. So we have alliteration, and then he goes into the Old English glede. But the alliteration is the arrow sped straight from the string. So sped straight from the string, straight for the hollow. So you got 4 S's there by the left breast, and now he goes to F's, where the foreleg was flung wide. In it smote and vanished barb, shaft and feather. So fierce was its flight. He's got all these. I mean, the whole sentence.
Yeah, that's not an accident.
Full of F's. Oh no way. So S's and F's are these. That's the sentence of the death of the dragon, and then he brings in the gledes, which is a cool Old English word that just basically means embers, coals and embers, and it's an awesome sounding word. So the medievalist in me was loved to see gledes used. I didn't appreciate it when I first read it, but later on, when I was reading it to my kids after my postgraduate work, I was it was noted. It was cool.
Yeah, it's essentially like you said, like an ember or a glowing coal, things that have been burning for long.
Yep. Okay. And then now, since Tolkien always uses his old versions always survive in some form or other, some hint even or other. Everyone thinks Bard's died, and like in his original version when Bard did die, like you mentioned, but then in the very midst of their talk, a tall figure steps from the shadows. He was drenched with water. His black hair hung wet over his face and shoulders, and a fierce light was in his eyes. Bard is not lost, he cried. He died from Esgaroth when the enemy was slain. I am Bard of the line of Girion. I am the slayer of the dragon. So not only has he defended his people by slaying the dragon, but he turns it towards basically a kind of demand for recognition, not only of his deed but of his line. So he's hearkening back, and maybe you can say thoughts already turning in Bard. Like it mentions multiple times that he's descended from Dale and from Lord Girion, and so maybe he's already thinking along this line that Esgaroth is no more. Obviously, he's going to help with the rebuild, but he is now thinking ahead and starting to angle towards the treasure that's in the mountain, as we find out in a paragraph or so, and leading the people and going to Dale.
Go ahead. I was going to say his appearance is Tolkien's opportunity to show the difference between Bard and the Master of Laketown, and what people really think of the Master of Laketown, or as they called him, Moneybags. And so when he comes, the Master immediately he ground his chattering teeth and says, "Girion was Lord of Dale, not King of Esgaroth. In the Laketown, we have always elected masters from among the old and the wise, and have not endured the rule of mere fighting men. Let King Bard go back to his own kingdom. Dale is now freed by his own valor, and nothing hinders his return. And any that can wish, go with it." It's like this political speech of like, I'm not belittling Bard. He's king over there, but not here where my fiefdom is, where my domain of rule is, because I'm old and wise, and just stick with me. But no, the people, as Tolkien would like them to, don't allow that to sway them, and they say, "We will have King Bard. We've had enough of the old men and the money counters." And people further off took up the cry, up the bowmen and down with Moneybags," till the clamor echoed along the shore.
Anyway, so it's fascinating that Tolkien is directly, he's further, he did it in a few chapters ago when the dwarves were in Laketown, but he's further connecting the Master with simply his status gained from his abilities as a merchant and a master of money. It even mentions that when everyone's escaping, he gets in his gilded boat, so even his boat has gold on it. And so he's a very rich man, and he got in this position by being rich and making other people rich, and the people are having none of it, like you said. But what's interesting is the mob doesn't have the last word. The master isn't going to go down without a fight. So he says, "I am the last man to undervalue Bard the bowman," said the master warily, for Bard now stood close beside him. It's like, not going to say anything bad about him because he might just throw you in the water. "He has tonight earned an eminent place in the role of the benefactors of our town." Like, the guy already has like a plan. Like, the way he thinks about things, the master does, is like, he's a benefactor of our town. Like, this is the mode of people who work in the world of money, and for whom that is the most important thing. Is he isn't the hero who's slain a dragon. Oh no, he's a benefactor of the town. Like, his name should be on a plaque somewhere.
Yeah, right,
as part of the benefactors of the town. And he is worthy of many imperishable songs. And then now here's the turn that I mentioned earlier. "But why, O people?" And here the master rose to his speak and spoke very loud and clear. "Why do I get all your blame? For what fault am I to be deposed? Who aroused the dragon from his slumber, might I ask?" I might ask. So then he goes on to blame the dwarves. And then Tolkien says, "As you see, the master had not got his position for nothing."
I've encountered these kind of people in real life, and let me just explain to you, as you can see.
He knows how to sway a crowd, and it does indeed do that. And the crowd now focuses on anger at the dwarves.
He certainly didn't want them to remember that he just abandoned the city just like everybody else. He didn't fight for anything, right? He's like Tolkien said, he's just a man to fill a role, but he's not a leader. And that's what you get with somebody with royal blood. And that's what ultimately Bard is. And Tolkien makes that very clear in this part of the story, that this is what he believes a real leader is.
I find this dialogue very fascinating for getting at Tolkien's idea about the internal politics of this kind of situation, because the mob is first the hero comes back and declares that he's the slayer of the dragon and he's descended from the from the lords of Dale, and the mob's first response is King Bard. That's what they want. And so then the master comes in and poo-poos that idea, and the mob turns against him, and then he manipulates the mob to turn against the dwarves, and then Bard's response is not the response of a king. He is a grim man. He says, "Fools, why waste words and wrath on those unhappy creatures?" That's the dwarves. "Doubtless they perished first in fire before Smaug came to us." So Bard has no patience. He doesn't have a honeyed tongue. He's no orator. He's no Aragorn, and he's no Faramir. He's not good with words. He's not even a Boromir. He's a grim man and doesn't say a lot before this chapter. And then now he's still going to be a kind of lord, though, and leader of his people in war, as we'll find out later.
Yeah, and Tolkien makes that clear. Like, he's no Faramir, he's no Aragorn, in the sense that what he says about him is that even as he was speaking, the thought came into his heart of the fabled treasure of the mountain lying without guard or owner, and he fell suddenly silent. That desire for the gold is even a part of him. Like, he can't get it out of his head.
Right.
He thought of Master's words, and of Dale rebuilt and filled with golden bells, if he could but find the men. Exactly.
So now he isn't as directly greedy as a guy like the master when he's doing it for himself, but you're right that he immediately goes to the wealth as a way to restore Dale, and so he's interested in seizing the wealth.
And I think Tolkien's phrase after that, where he says, like, look, the thought of the gold and the wealth affects Bard, but then it's like he almost like he has a moment to collect his thoughts and to not go in that direction, and he says, at length he spoke again. It's almost like he had to pause and say, that's not the focus right now. There's no time for angry words, master, for considering weighty plans of change. There is work to do. I serve you still, though after a while I may think again of your words and go north with any that will follow me. He thinks of it, but he's not completely swayed by it and isn't going to go and try and retrieve the gold right away, right? He's here to help the people, what as a leader should do, right? The leader is there to rebuild his people and to raise them up, not just there to attack other kingdoms for the fortune and glory of it.
Exactly. And then as the tale goes on, as we mentioned in the summary, the perspective shifts, and now it sort of zooms out, and we see what happens about the people of Esgaroth trying to build shelters and everyone pitching in. And Bard says that he acts in the name of the master. So even though the master doesn't tell him what to do, he said to act in that way, but he's not going to try to overthrow the master because he has his sights set on Dale. He kind of agrees with the master. He's going to, in fact, leave and go to Dale and reestablish Dale, which is, as we mentioned, a good, 50 miles or so from Esgaroth. So it's its own place. This is not like just across, a few hundred yards away. There won't be any conflict between the new Laketown and Dale. They're going to be their own settlements and their own peoples and live in harmony with each other for the most part, as we find out later from Tolkien's appendices of the Lord of the Rings. But it now shifts to the perspective of what happened and the elves. And here I can't help but feel that Tolkien is starting to bring in more of the elves of Middle-earth, of Lord of the Rings, of his old writings, because instead of the elves being fey and hard to pin down and petty and kind of venal, here we get a view of the elves where the elves, there's a whole bunch of things. First, they're notified of the death of the dragon and the Mirkwood, tidings that Smaug is dead from the birds, as you mentioned. And we'll talk about the birds a little later. But he gathers his folk, and we hear the words or thoughts of the king, words, I guess. That will be the last we shall hear of Thorin Oakenshield, I fear, said the king. He would have done better to have remained my guest. So that's interesting because now all of a sudden the king is being portrayed as someone who has concern for Thorin, whereas before he had nothing but just sort of anger and a kind of petty anger, the kind of the fey anger of you've messed with our feast, and so you must and you've trespassed in Mirkwood. And here it's now, well, he should have stayed with us because it would have been better for him because he thinks Thorin's dead, of course. And then he says, it is an ill wind all the same that blows no one to any good, for he too had not forgotten the legend of the wealth of Thror. So now he's thinking of like the greater good of everyone. It's like, he foresees that the treasure of Thror and of the Lonely Mountain is going to be now in play, and he sees it as no good. So this is an elf king with wisdom now, and it's not the elf king of the earlier part of the book. And so he sends messengers, and then furthermore, he sends it. The elves begin marching, and they're going to march straight to the Lonely Mountain, but they're pulled aside because Bard sends his prayers, and so now they're compassionate. Now you can say, well, they had a deal with the men of Laketown anyway for trade. Fair enough, but this is the elf king's greatest concern: is this treasure. And the ill it could do, and obviously he's going to try to seize it himself because he loves the gems. So there's part of that there, but Tolkien doesn't mention that part. He just mentions the ill wind of the treasure being left unguarded now, and he turns aside nevertheless with his army in order to help the people of Laketown. So and delays his march on the Lonely Mountain. I just think that's my thesis, is that here we have the elves have begun to morph a bit. Not completely. We'll still see some of their pettiness in the dialogue to come outside the gates of the Lonely Mountain, but they're a lot wiser than they were, and the king is a lot wiser than he was.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, he calls him directly the Lord of a good and kindly people, and kindly isn't the word we would have used earlier to describe these elves and how they treated the dwarves or Bilbo in any way at all. In fact,
we wouldn't have called them evil, but we definitely wouldn't have called them kindly. They were fey. They were hard. They were mysterious. They were
self-centered.
They were very self-centered. Yeah,
and kind of. And here, he turns the boats. He sends boats ahead with stores and with food for them. They're there to help he brought with him they had some men of crafts and many skilled elves. They busy themselves felling trees, so he's there helping rebuild Laketown. Now, maybe it's just because he wants the wine and Laketown delivered all that wine to him.
Maybe, but it would have said something about that. Like, what Tolkien gives us is compassion, not like sort of a friendship of utility. He does mention that and their master, the men and their master, were ready to make any bargain for the future in return for the Elven King's aid. So he's not completely altruistic, But it's focused on their compassion, and they wait 6 days. They arrive 5 days after Smaug's death, and they don't leave till 11 days since Smaug's death for the Lonely Mountains. They wait almost a week. The Elven army spends rebuilding and helping the people of Laketown. So that's no small thing in their case with this legendary treasure lying there unguarded. They think, because they don't know about the dwarves. Yeah, that's the end of the chapter.
Well, and they think ultimately in a way they think they have the time to wait because Thranduil assumes that the dwarves are dead. That there's no reason.
Yeah, although I think that Thranduil, he doesn't name him as Thranduil yet, but I think Thranduil is also knows, like, he got messages from the birds about the death of Smaug, and he's not an unwise elf, and he can't. I have to think in his position, you'd think other people are going to hear about this too. And indeed, we're told directly that even Bjorn and the goblins of Misty Mountains hear the tuttings from the birds. Yeah. Those birds.
What is up with the talking birds? What is it with Tolkien and birds? And the only other real birds I start thinking about are the birds in The Mariner's Wife that are given as a wedding gift, right? That are
right. Although you have to realize
that don't really talk, but
the eagles do. So
eagles do in this one, yeah.
And they're not directly servants of Manwë in this when they're first written. They are just a race of creatures that plagues both men and goblins, though they have a peculiar dislike of goblins.
Yeah. Yeah, though the thrushes can speak to only those of royal blood too.
Right. Is it royal blood or just of Dale?
Of Dale, right? I thought it was to the I did not look this up precisely to get the line. I was assuming it was under the royal blood. Let's see.
He was of the race of Dale. He found he could understand its tongue, for he was of the race of Dale. So I think it's like a tradition of the people of Dale that it speaks. Okay. It's not speaking in the language of the men of Laketown. It's not speaking in Westron.
He can understand
its own tongue. So it's talking in a bird tongue, but he just knows bird tongue because he's from Dale. I don't know if that's a genetic thing or probably a taught thing, a handed down thing. One would think it was handed down.
Yeah. This is what Thorin says when Bilbo is harassing the bird. He says they were a long-lived and magical race, these thrushes, and this might even be one of those that were alive then a couple hundred years ago or more. The men of Dale used to have the trick of understanding their language and used them for messengers to fly to the men of the lake and elsewhere.
Yeah.
So you're right. It wasn't royalty, but it was a trick of understanding.
It was of Dale, but also it wasn't learned. I'm going back on my position there because it says the trick and which you could argue maybe was a learned language, but I'm going to argue against a learned language. I'm going to argue against a genetic thing because or a thing having to do with the nature of the birds being enchanted and long lived, because when it begins talking to him, it says, marveling he found he could understand its tongue. Well, if he had been taught its tongue from his youth, and it was just a tradition of Dale, he wouldn't have marveled that he could understand it because it was a thrush and he would understand it. But it turns out, he's surprised by the understanding of the thrush's words. So I'm going to argue for it being a Tolkien-esque thing where, like the elves can understand the animals and the rocks, even according to Legolas, the men of Dale could understand these thrush, this thrush tongue. So
and the Tolkien just says it was the birds that loved the Elvenking's folk that delivered the news to them too, and it wasn't necessarily the thrush. So this was a special thing that the men of Dale had.
Right. It even says crows followed them they're kind of an ominous bird, crows, but. Followed their army when they marched out. So, anyhow,
it says that. Where does it say?
It's a fun chapter. Lots of cool details.
Just real fast, did I miss that? Where does it say crows followed his?
Let me see.
I'm gonna find this here. It was this one. No, it's not there. Okay.
And crows gathered thick. So it was that Bard's messengers found him, that's the king, now marching with many spearmen and bowmen, and crows were gathered thick above him. For they thought that war was awakening again, such as had not been in these parts for a long age.
Now, is that because the crows just want to pick the flesh from the bodies?
Yeah, Tolkien's not saying crows have an affinity for elves.
Yeah,
they're just thinking crows just know that armies beset, are the precursor to great carrion feasts.
Right. All right. Well, there you go. A whole chapter in an hour, guys. We're doing this. We're doing better. We're getting it through it twice as fast.
Well, it's a fun chapter. It's got a lot of details. I feel like Tolkien's kind of hitting his stride. He's with building out his world in a lot of ways with this chapter.
Yeah, and we've gone into some of those deep discussions of all the characters now and all the places and all the history and things like that. Now we're kind of just enjoying this story as it comes to its fruition that has been built up through the last 14 chapters. So we're going to get into our extended edition here, everybody, and we're going to talk about a few comments about the Arkenstone that we got about the last episode. We're going to look at maybe a little bit more about the talking birds, though we may have that we may have settled that in our freeloader edition here. Maybe we'll have more. I don't know. But then we're going to take a look at what was pointed out in the Discord discussion, which you can get to by going to theonering.com/member and becoming a member, everybody. You get access to our Discord, you get access to the extended edition, and we will be having a chat in a month because we just had it last night, because the day we release this is the day after we had the chat. I am so sorry, but everybody, you missed out. Become a member. Oh, and everybody, I was really shooting. We're building an app here for exploring Tolkien. We're not going to call it the One Ring. We're going to call it Exploring Tolkien. That makes more sense to us. And you will have the alerts for the chats and the videos, and you get the podcast through it. We'll work on making it so that members can also get the members-only podcast through it. That's going to be a little more work. I'm trying to release it in October at some point. That's still my goal. There's still a lot of work left to do. But if you become a member, you will get more from it. But yeah, I'll let you know when it's released. It'll be just under Exploring Tolkien in the App Store. It'll be free. The only thing you have to pay for is this special membership stuff. I'm not going to make anything else in the app charging or anything like that. You just get it, and you get all the news, you get all the events, you'll get we're also going to do like Today in Tolkien. We're going to be like, what happened today in the history of Tolkien and Middle Earth and all that sort of stuff.
That'll be fun.
So whenever you open the app, you'll get the new latest Today in Tolkien, and then you'll also get like an image of the day every day. So like we've got a gallery, a database of thousands of images, so we'll be popping that in every day, but it's going to be free. Nobody has to pay for it. All right, guys, we're going to jump into our extended podcast. Everybody, thanks for joining us. We'll see you in another couple weeks, unless you're one of our special people. So we'll see you there.
But if you aren't, goodbye, freeloaders.